getting out. It was about, about 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we had just time to catch a train. There was about 10 of us wanting to come to Kansas City. And we had just time to get down there, but we had to charter a bus to do it. Well, the bus went about 50 miles and broke down. And they had to get another bus out there, and we got into Kansas City. We missed the midnight trains because then a train went every direction at midnight. And I had one I could catch to Paola, see? Well, it was gone. And so here I was in Kansas City at the station with about a 60-pound duffel bag, and couldn't get to Paola. So I went over I carried the bag over to Southwest Boulevard, about 2 or 3 blocks there, trying to hitchhike, and nobody would pick me up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And finally, the paper truck, the Kansas City Star paper truck that delivered papers all the way down to, I don't know, Fort Scott or something.
Oh, really?
Well, they did it early in the morning, and they deliver them down for the mail carriers to deliver them to the people. And he saw me stand there, and he stopped, and he says, "Need a ride?" And I says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well," he says, "I stopped a few times, but you can go with me." And I said, "I'm going to go to Paola." I wanted to go to Hillsdale, but I said Paola. He said, "Well, I'm going to Paola, but I got to stop a few times." But we stopped at, I think, Lenexa and whichever place, and delivered papers. And and he let me out in Hillsdale about 4:15 in the morning.
Oh.
And it was in October and crisp out, and I had this 60-pound duffel bag. And I didn't want to call the folks at 4 o'clock in the morning because at first the telephone system, the way it worked then, you
rang everybody.
You had everybody up then.
You wake up central.
I carried the duffel bag about a quarter of a mile and threw it over in Hillsdale Cemetery and just started walking. And I walked from Hillsdale to home. And it was a crisp night, moonlight night, and I never enjoyed anything so much.
Oh, really?
Well, you know, I was...
Oh, yeah.
It was just so good to get home.
I was out in the Army.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, it was just a great feeling.
And I got there and went in the house, and folks weren't even up there. I got there. Then it was about January the 3rd, I think. I had to go to Biloxi, Mississippi, and I got in down there, and then wasn't in the Army very long, and Roosevelt died. I was in basic training, and I always remember that because we had to stand at detention for 2 hours during his service. And then I passed for pilot training, and there was only about 20 of us out of 600 that got passed for pilot training.
Oh, really?
Well, there were some secrets there they didn't know.
Now, would that have just been written tests to get into pilot training?
Well, first place, if you're over 6 foot tall, you couldn't be a gunner. You couldn't get in the ball turret on a gun.
Right.
So that had a little influence on it. And I could stretch up to just a little over 6 foot, or I could duck this way and I was just right at 6 foot. And you had to know the right answers when they asked you the right questions. Depth perception washed out more people than anything else. You know, what out to 30 feet. You had a rope with 2 pins on it. It's set up like this, and they were 30 feet apart, and you picked those ropes up and you pulled them up, and bang, you just pulled them up like that and stopped them, see, when they were right. That's your depth perception.
Okay.
And if you were off more than 6 inches, you were out of pilot training. I mean, your depth perception. Well, I cheated a little and figured out how to do it, and I got passed, and then they asked you a bunch of other questions, and finally I wound up for pilot training. So they said, well, meanwhile, after I trained there, I sent me to California, out to Minter Field, close to Bakersfield. And I was just working there in a flight line as a mechanic. because they weren't ready to call us up yet, see. Well, while we were out there, then along comes VE Day, then VJ Day, and on VE Day, everybody went out and got drunk and raised so much hell in California that
I bet they did.
well, there were literally riots, not just soldiers, but
Oh.
everybody. It was just out of
Everybody.
control. So that was on VE Day. On VJ Day, which was 2 or 3 months later, they said you're restricted to the base. You can't get off because of the problems they had.
Right.
Well, my buddy and I, we wanted to get off and see what was going on, and we found out our first sergeant in the orderly room was an alcoholic.
Oh.
So we went down and bought a fifth of whiskey and took him down to this guy, and he gave us our passes, and he wasn't supposed to. And we got off. And
So you went into Bakersfield then?
Well, I went to San Francisco because
Oh.
Uncle Gilbert
Oh.
lived up there. See, and
Yeah.
I'd been up there before visiting, so I went up there
Mm-hmm.
and got to his place and spent the first night. And the second night, things were getting rough. They said any serviceman caught on the street after 6 o'clock is going to jail
Oh.
in San Francisco. So I decided I better get out of there, and I started hitchhiking. I went back to the base and got back all
Well,
right.
that was a little ways though.
That was 450 miles.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But out there you could hitchhike. A soldier could,
Yeah,
I
I guess
guess
that's right.
you know,
Really.